The notification popped up on my phone while I was in the middle of a client presentation. Normally, I'd ignore these things, but the amount, $12,487, made my fingers go numb on the laser pointer. I excused myself, leaving Marcus to handle the rest of the slides about our new marketing campaign. My name is Arabella, and until 5 minutes ago, I thought I had my life figured out. There must be some mistake, I muttered, pacing outside the conference room. 3 more notifications pinged in rapid succession. Hotel reservations in Rome, first-class airline tickets, restaurant deposits. I called Daniel, straight to voicemail. Of course. Hey, everything okay? Marcus stuck his head out the door, concern etched on his face. The clients loved your pitch, by the way. Fine, just family stuff. I forced a smile that felt like cracking glass. Back at my desk, I pulled up our joint account. The transactions formed a perfect trail of breadcrumbs leading to what appeared to be a luxury vacation in Italy. For 6 people, including his parents. My phone buzzed. Daniel. Hey babe, you're probably wondering about those charges. $12,000, Daniel, without even mentioning it to me. It's an investment in our future. Mom and Dad haven't been anywhere since their 40th anniversary, and your parents deserve a break too. I've been planning this for months. The calm in his voice made my skin crawl. Planning what exactly? To drain our savings without asking me? Come on, you're making this into something it's not. I got a great deal on everything. The exchange rate is perfect right now. I pressed my fingers against my temples. With what money? You haven't had steady work in months. I picked up some consulting gigs. Plus, your bonus is coming up. My bonus? The words tasted like metal. The one I haven't even received yet? Look, I wanted it to be a surprise. Something special for both our families. You're always saying we should spend more time with them. I watched my reflection in the office window, wondering when I'd become someone who could be so easily manipulated. Cancel it. All of it. Now. Already paid in full, non-refundable. But trust me, once we're there... Trust you? I laughed, and it sounded foreign to my own ears. Like I trusted you with the joint account? Like I trusted you when you said you were actively job hunting? You're overreacting. I'll explain everything tonight. Mom and Dad are coming over for dinner to celebrate. They're what? They're bringing that tiramisu you love. Dad's excited about seeing the Colosseum. The casual way he dropped this information made my blood boil. Don't you dare make any more plans without consulting me. Bella, honey, you need to relax. This is supposed to be happy news. I ended the call and sat there, staring at my screen. Numbers swam before my eyes. Our mortgage payment, utilities, my student loans. All carefully budgeted, all now thrown into chaos because my husband decided to play travel agent with money we didn't have. A message popped up from his mother, Evelyn. So thrilled about Italy. Daniel says you've been planning this for months. You're such a thoughtful daughter-in-law. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. What could I say? That her son had just committed financial infidelity? That the thoughtful daughter-in-law was actually clueless about the whole thing? Another message from Daniel. Don't say anything to Mom and Dad yet. Let's talk first. I opened our banking app again, scrolling through months of transactions, small withdrawals I'd overlooked, transfers to accounts I didn't recognize, a pattern emerging like a snake shedding its skin. Marcus knocked on my cubicle wall. Executive meeting in 10. You coming? I nodded, gathering my things, already formulating a plan. Daniel thought he could surprise everyone with a dream vacation? Well, I had some surprises of my own in store. Actually, I said to Marcus, could I get your help with something after the meeting? It's about financial fraud. The tiramisu sat untouched on our dining table, its cocoa dusting a perfect mockery of domestic bliss. Evelyn had been talking nonstop about Italy for 20 minutes while Frank nodded along, his engineer's mind probably already mapping out every museum and monument. The Sistine Chapel alone is worth the trip, Evelyn said, reaching across to pat my hand. Daniel tells us you've been so excited about this surprise. I took a long sip of wine, letting the bitter taste ground me. Daniel sat beside me, his hand resting possessively on my knee under the table. I moved my leg away. Actually, Mom, Daniel jumped in. Arabella's been pretty stressed about work lately. Maybe we should talk about something else. Stressed? I set down my glass harder than necessary. Is that what we're calling it? Frank looked up from his plate. Everything all right? Perfect, Daniel said quickly. Just some temporary cash flow issues we're sorting out. Cash flow issues? The words escaped before I could stop them. Is that what you call emptying our savings? The room went silent. Evelyn's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. Daniel? His mother's voice had that particular tone I remembered from our wedding day, when he'd shown up an hour late to the rehearsal dinner. It's not like that, Daniel said, his smile strained. We've got plenty saved. The trip's completely covered. I pulled out my phone, opened the banking app. Show them, Daniel. Show them how it's covered. Bella, please. Or should I? Because I've got quite a few interesting transactions pulled up right here. Frank set down his napkin. Son, what's going on? Nothing's going on. Arabella's just being dramatic about... About what? I turned to face him fully. About the fact that you've been moving money around without telling me? About the credit card charges I never approved? Or about telling your parents I helped plan this whole thing? Evelyn's face had gone pale. Daniel, did you do this without discussing it with Arabella? Mom, it's complicated. I wanted to do something nice for everyone. Make up for, everything else. Everything else? Frank's voice had dropped an octave. What else have you done? I watched Daniel's face, saw the familiar dance of excuses forming behind his eyes. The same look he'd had when he quit his last job without telling me, when he borrowed money from our wedding fund for a sure-thing investment. Nothing, he said. Just, work's been slow, but I've got some promising leads. Leads? I laughed. Like the consulting gigs you mentioned? The ones you can't seem to name? Arabella, Evelyn started, her hands twisting her napkin. Perhaps we should postpone the trip until... There's nothing to postpone, I said, standing up, because it's not happening. I'm calling the credit card company tomorrow to dispute the charges. Daniel grabbed my wrist. You can't do that. I promised everyone. Let go of me. My voice came out steady, surprising even myself. Frank stood up too. Daniel, take your hand off your wife. The pressure on my wrist released. I walked to our bedroom, returned with the stack of bank statements I'd printed earlier. Here, I said, dropping them on the table. Since we're all being honest now, take a look at what your son's been up to for the past year. Bella, stop. No, you stop. Stop lying. Stop pretending. Stop treating me like I'm stupid enough to believe your excuses anymore. Evelyn picked up the statements with trembling hands. Frank leaned in to look, his engineering precision evident in how carefully he studied each page. Jesus Christ, Daniel, he muttered. What have you done? It's not what it looks like, Daniel said, but his voice had lost its confidence. Really? I pulled out my phone again. Should we call the bank? Ask about those mysterious transfers to accounts I've never heard of? Or maybe we should discuss the job you told everyone you had last month? The silence that followed felt like a living thing, consuming all the oxygen in the room. Evelyn was crying silently. Frank's face had turned to stone. And Daniel just sat there, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. I think, Frank said finally, standing up, we should go home and discuss this as a family. Dad, not now, Daniel. Not another word. They left without touching the tiramisu. I stood at the window, watching them drive away, feeling Daniel's presence behind me like a shadow. You've ruined everything, he said quietly. I turned to face him, something cold and determined settling in my chest. No, Daniel, I've only just started. Marcus spread the documents across his desk, each page a new revelation in Daniel's web of deception. My hands trembled as I pointed to the transaction patterns. Look at these withdrawals, I said, always just under the reporting threshold. Marcus whistled low. And you said he worked at Meridian Tech last year? For exactly 8 months. I pulled up an email on my phone. According to their HR department, he was in accounts receivable. The same department that reported those missing payments? Marcus leaned back, running a hand through his hair. Bella, this is way beyond a few unauthorized credit card charges. The office felt suddenly too small, too warm. Through the glass walls, I could see other employees going about their day, their normalcy a stark contrast to my unraveling world. My phone buzzed. Another message from Evelyn. Please call us. We need to understand what's happening with Daniel. I ignored it, just like I'd ignored the last 6. There's more, I said, pulling out another stack of papers. I found these in his desk last night while he was sleeping. Marcus examined the loan applications, his expression darkening. These are all in your name. He forged my signature. The words tasted like ash. 3 different banks. 2 were rejected, but 1, Jesus. I called the bank this morning. The loan officer remembered Daniel, said he was very convincing about why his wife couldn't come in person. Something about me being away on business. A knock at the door made us both jump. Sophia stood there, her laptop clutched to her chest. You need to see this, she said, her voice tight. She opened her computer, pulled up a local news website. The headline hit me like a physical blow. Local tech company reports major financial discrepancies. Former employee under investigation. It doesn't name Daniel, Sophia said quickly, but the dates match. My phone buzzed again. Daniel this time. We need to talk. Now. Stop telling people lies about me. He doesn't know yet, I said, more to myself than them. About any of this. Marcus closed the door. Bella, you need to go to the police. No. The word came out sharp, surprising even me. Not yet. But he needs to feel what it's like first, the slow realization that everything's falling apart, the helplessness of watching your life crumble while someone else holds all the cards. Sophia touched my arm. That's not you talking. That's anger. Maybe it should be me. I gathered the documents, my movements precise, controlled. Do you know what he said last night? That I should be grateful. Grateful that he's trying to give me the life I deserve. My phone kept buzzing. Frank now. Son, if you're reading this, please come home. We can fix this together. They still think they can save him, I said, laughing without humor. Just like I did, for years. Marcus exchanged a look with Sophia. What are you planning? Nothing illegal. I stood up, straightening my jacket. Just justice. Bella. I've already called the credit card companies, reported the fraud, frozen our joint accounts. By now, he's probably discovered his cards don't work. As if on cue, my phone lit up with Daniel's face. I let it ring. He's been living off my income, my credit, my reputation. Each word felt like releasing a poison. Time he learned what it's like to have nothing. Sophia stepped forward. And then what? You destroy him, and then what? I looked at the documents spread across the desk. Each page a betrayal, each number a lie. Then I get my life back. My phone buzzed one final time. A text from an unknown number. Mrs. Harrison, this is Detective Moore from the Financial Crimes Unit. We need to speak with you regarding some irregularities at Meridian Tech. The room went silent. Marcus and Sophia watched me, waiting for a reaction. I picked up my phone, typed a quick response. I'll be there in an hour, and I have something you should see. Bella, Sophia said softly, are you sure about this? I gathered the documents into my briefcase, each movement deliberate and final. Daniel taught me something important, about facades, about how easily they crack under pressure. I headed for the door, then paused. The difference is, I'm not hiding anymore. Behind me, I could hear Marcus and Sophia whispering, probably worried about what I'd become, but they didn't understand. Sometimes justice and revenge wear the same face. My phone buzzed again. Daniel. Whatever you're doing, stop, please. You're destroying everything. I smiled, finally replying. No, Daniel. I'm just getting started. Detective Moore's office felt like a confessional box, sterile and judgment-free, but I could feel the weight of every document I'd brought pressing against my ribs like a secret trying to escape. Mrs. Harrison, she said, sliding a paper across her desk, do you recognize this signature? I leaned forward. The loan application looked identical to the others, except for one detail: the date. Last week. While I was tracking Daniel's past frauds, he'd been busy creating new ones. That's not my signature. My voice sounded distant, hollow. We know. Detective Moore's expression softened slightly. We've been building a case against your husband for months. Multiple victims, Mrs. Harrison. Not just you. The room tilted sideways. Multiple? She opened a folder, spreading photographs across her desk. I recognized some faces, colleagues from Daniel's previous jobs, friends who'd stopped coming around. Each photo attached to a statement, a complaint, a broken trust. My phone buzzed. Daniel. Coming home early, we need to talk about what you've done. Mrs. Harrison? Detective Moore was watching me carefully. There's something else you should know. She pulled out another document, a marriage certificate, recent. Daniel's name next to someone else's, dated 3 years ago, while we were already married. The floor disappeared beneath my feet. Bigamy, Detective Moore said quietly. Among other things. My phone buzzed again. Sophia. Daniel just left the house. He looked angry. Are you safe? We can protect you, the detective continued, but we need your cooperation. I stood up, my legs steadier than they had any right to be. I need to go. Mrs. Harrison, I'll help you. But first, I need to do something. Outside, the autumn air hit my face like a slap. I called Marcus. Is everything ready? Bella, maybe we should wait. Is it ready? A pause. Yes. The evidence is compiled. One email, and it goes to everyone. His parents, his former employers, everyone he's ever scammed. I ended the call, staring at my phone. Daniel's latest message glowed. Whatever you think you know, you're wrong. I did everything for us. The laugh that escaped me drew concerned looks from passing strangers. For us. Always for us. Never for the other wife, or the other victims, or the truth. My finger hovered over Marcus's email link. One click, and Daniel's carefully constructed world would implode. Justice served cold, just like I'd planned. Another message, from an unknown number. You don't know me, but I'm Daniel's other wife. We need to talk. The world shifted again, reality rearranging itself like a kaleidoscope. I thought I'd seen the full picture of Daniel's betrayal, but I'd only been looking at fragments. My phone rang. Evelyn. Arabella, please. Daniel says you're trying to destroy him. There must be some mistake. I watched people walking past, living their normal lives, unaware that somewhere nearby, a man named Daniel was driving home to confront his wife about exposing his lies, not knowing which wife had finally caught him. No mistake, I told Evelyn. But you should know, I'm not his only wife. The silence on the other end felt like a physical presence. He's on his way home, I said. To my home. Or maybe to hers. I guess we'll find out. I ended the call and opened Marcus's email. The evidence sat there, waiting to be released like a virus into Daniel's carefully constructed fiction. My finger trembled over the screen. This wasn't just revenge anymore. This was protection. For me, for the other wife, for anyone else Daniel might target in the future. Another message from the unknown number. He's dangerous when he's cornered. Trust me. I thought about the Daniel I knew. Charming, persuasive, always with a reasonable explanation. How many faces did he wear? How many lives had he built and destroyed? The sun was setting, painting the city in shades of amber and shadow. Somewhere in this gathering darkness, Daniel was coming home to a reckoning. The question was, which home? Which truth? Which version of himself would he try to save? I pressed send. Then I called Detective Moore. I'm ready to make a statement, but first there's someone else you need to talk to. The other wife's number glowed on my screen like a beacon in the growing dark. Some revelations don't just change the story, they change the storyteller. And I was done being the victim in Daniel's fiction. The cafe where I met Daniel's other wife smelled like burnt coffee and secrets. Sarah, that was her name, looked nothing like me. Tall, blonde, confident. The kind of woman who'd never believe a con man's lies, until she did. He always said he was traveling for work, she said, stirring her untouched latte. I thought he was building our future. My laptop sat between us like a loaded gun. On the screen, dozens of emails detailed Daniel's elaborate financial web, the fake consulting jobs, the hidden accounts, the carefully orchestrated lies that kept both marriages running in parallel. 3 years, I said. We overlapped for 3 years. Sarah's hand trembled slightly as she pulled out her own stack of documents. There's more. I found these last night. Bank statements, different names, same handwriting, more victims, more lies, stretching back before either of us entered his life. My phone buzzed. Marcus. Daniel's looking for you. He's been to the office. He'll try to explain everything, Sarah said, watching my face. He'll make it sound reasonable, make us doubt ourselves. He's good at that. The cafe door chimed. Sophia rushed in, her face pale. Bella, he's here, in the parking lot. I started gathering the documents, but Sarah grabbed my wrist. Wait, let him come. What? Detective Moore is outside. We planned this, remember? My hand stilled. Yes, we'd planned it. The trap was set. But seeing Daniel walk through that door, his familiar smile faltering as he spotted us together, it hit differently than I'd imagined. Bella, he said. Then his eyes found Sarah. The color drained from his face. Sit down, Daniel, Sarah said quietly. It's time we all had a talk. He remained standing, gaze darting between us, calculating, always calculating. Whatever you think you know, we know everything, I cut in, turning my laptop to face him. Every account, every lie, every life you've stolen. I can explain, like you explained the Italy trip. I pulled up the credit card statements, or the consulting jobs that never existed, or maybe you'd like to explain how you managed to marry both of us. His face shifted, the mask slipping for just a moment. You don't understand. I did it all for... Don't, Sarah interrupted. Don't you dare say you did it for us. People were starting to stare. Through the window, I caught glimpses of Detective Moore's team taking positions. Daniel sat down heavily, his charm evaporating like morning dew. How long have you been working together? Long enough, I said, but my voice wavered slightly. Even now, part of me wanted to believe there was an explanation, a reason that would make sense of the past 5 years. You know what's interesting? Sarah leaned forward. We found Monica. Daniel's head snapped up. Your first wife, I continued, watching his reaction. The one whose identity you stole to start this whole scheme. She's been very helpful with the investigation. His hands clenched on the table. You don't know what you're doing. The money, it's not what you think. There are people who depend on... Save it for the detective, Sarah said, standing up. She's very interested in hearing all about these dependent people. As if on cue, Detective Moore entered the cafe. Daniel's eyes darted to the exit, but it was already blocked by another officer. Mr. Harrison? Moore said, or should I say Mr. Reynolds? We need to talk about some irregularities in your financial records. I watched them lead him away, his shoulders slumped, the performance finally over. Sarah touched my arm. You okay? I nodded, but my throat felt tight. Did we do the right thing? Ask Monica. Ask the others he scammed. Ask yourself in 6 months when you're not drowning in his debts. My phone buzzed one last time. Evelyn, please tell me it's not true. Tell me my son wouldn't do this. I stared at the message, thinking about all the mothers whose children had been hurt by Daniel's schemes, about all the lives he'd casually destroyed while building his house of cards. Come on, Sophia said gently. Let's get out of here. Outside, the autumn air felt cleaner somehow. Sarah and I exchanged numbers, survivors of the same storm, connected by more than just betrayal now. What happens next? I asked Detective Moore as she finished taking our statements. Justice, she said simply. But first, we need to find out how deep this really goes. I watched Daniel through the patrol car window, already rehearsing his next performance. But this time, his audience wouldn't be so willing to believe. The courthouse hallway stretched endlessly before me, its fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows on Daniel's arrest report. 3 hours into his bail hearing, and I still couldn't process the newest revelation. There were more victims, many more. "Mrs. Harrison?" A court clerk approached with another stack of papers. "These just came in from Detective Moore. More statements, more lives destroyed, more proof that the man I married never existed." Sarah appeared beside me, her heels clicking against the marble floor. "They're letting him speak." My stomach lurched. "What?" "He's convinced the judge he has evidence about where the money went. Says he can prove it wasn't theft." Through the courtroom doors, I could hear Daniel's voice. That smooth, reasonable tone that had convinced so many people to trust him, to love him. "Don't." Sarah grabbed my arm as I moved toward the doors. "That's what he wants, to see us react." But I pushed through anyway, just in time to hear him say my name. "Arabella knew everything," Daniel was saying, his hands spread in supplication. "She managed our finances. She suggested the investment schemes. I was just trying to protect her." The room spun. From the gallery, I saw Evelyn and Frank watching their son, their faces carved from stone. Behind them sat Monica, Daniel's first wife, her presence a silent testimony to his pattern of destruction. "Furthermore," Daniel continued, "I can prove that Mrs. Harrison was complicit in—" "Objection," the prosecutor stood. "The defendant is attempting to shift blame without evidence." But the damage was done. I felt the stares, the whispers. Even the court reporter's fingers had stilled on her keyboard. My phone vibrated. "Marcus, turn on the news, now." Sarah was already pulling up the local news site on her tablet. The headline hit like a physical blow. "Financial scandal widens. Marketing executive implicated in husband's schemes." My company's name, my position, my reputation. "He's trying to drag you down with him," Sarah whispered. The judge called a recess. As people filed out, Daniel caught my eye. For a moment I saw past his prison jumpsuit to the man who'd once convinced me we'd build a perfect life together. "Mrs. Harrison?" Detective Moore appeared at my elbow. "We need to talk. There's been a development." In her office, she spread out new evidence, emails I'd supposedly sent, documents with my electronic signature, transfers I'd allegedly approved. All expertly forged, all damning. "He's been planning this," Moore said quietly, "setting up a backup story in case he got caught." "But it's not true," my voice cracked. "None of it's true. We know that, but clearing your name will take time. Meanwhile—" She slid a newspaper across her desk. My company's stock had dropped 12% after the news broke. My phone buzzed again. A message from my CEO. "Need to meet immediately regarding your position." Sarah touched my shoulder. "We'll fight this, like we fought everything else." But I barely heard her. All I could think about was Daniel's voice in court, reasonable and calm, spinning lies into truth. How many people would believe him? How many already did? Outside Moore's office, I found Evelyn waiting. "I need to know," she said, her voice thin. "Did you really—" The question hung between us like poison. His own mother, who'd watched him destroy 3 marriages, who'd seen the evidence of his fraud, was still willing to believe his lies about me. "You raised him well," I said, finally. "He learned how to hurt people so carefully they thank him for it." I walked away before she could respond, past the reporters gathering in the lobby, past the curious stares and whispered conversations. In my car, I found one last message from Daniel, sent through his lawyer. "I never wanted to hurt you, but I won't go down alone." The sun was setting over the city, painting everything in shades of blood and shadow. Somewhere in a jail cell, Daniel was probably smiling, knowing he'd found one last way to make me pay for exposing him. My phone lit up with another call from my CEO. I let it ring, watching the courthouse steps fill with reporters eager to tell the story of how Daniel Harrison's wife had helped him destroy countless lives. Sarah's words echoed in my head. "We'll fight this." But sitting alone in my car, watching my life unravel through headlines and accusations, I wondered if there would be anything left worth fighting for. The prison visiting room smelled of industrial cleaner and desperation. Daniel sat across from me, orange jumpsuit stark against his pale skin, while Detective Moore watched from behind the two-way mirror. "You look tired," he said, as if we were meeting for coffee instead of a confrontation that would determine both our fates. "They found the storage unit," I replied, watching his face. "The one in Monica's name." His expression didn't change, but his fingers twitched slightly against the metal table. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Funny thing about paper trails," I continued, sliding a document across to him. "They never really disappear, even when you think you've burned them all." The document was a lease agreement, not for a storage unit, but for a small office in a business park. Daniel's eyes widened slightly as he recognized the address. "That's where you kept everything, isn't it? The real records. The proof of what you did with all that money." "Bella." "Don't." My voice came out harder than I'd expected. "Sarah found it first. Did you know she used to work in commercial real estate? She recognized your pattern, always the same type of building, always paid in cash." A muscle twitched in his jaw. "Whatever you think you found?" "We found everything, Daniel. The ledgers, the fake IDs, the evidence that you've been running this scheme since college." I leaned forward. "But that's not even the interesting part." His composure cracked slightly. "What do you want?" "The truth. For once in your life, just tell me the truth." He glanced at the mirror, then back at me. "You wouldn't understand. Try me." "It started small," he said finally. "Just borrowing from one account to cover another. Then I realized how easy it was. How people would just trust me. Like I trusted you." His laugh was hollow. "You were different. You were supposed to be the end of it. The real thing. Until you married Sarah. That was complicated. And Monica? Was she complicated too?" He flinched at her name. "You don't know anything about Monica." "I know enough." I pulled out another document, a hospital record. "I know why you really started stealing money." Daniel went very still. "Where did you get that?" "Monica told me everything. About your sister, about the medical bills your parents couldn't pay." I watched his mask crack further. "You started stealing to save her life." "Don't." His voice shook. "Don't talk about her." "But she died anyway, and you couldn't stop, could you? The stealing became something else, a way to fill the hole she left." "Shut up." He slammed his hands on the table. The guard stepped forward, but I waved him back. "Here's what's going to happen," I said quietly. "You're going to sign a full confession, not just about the fraud, but about how you set me up to take the fall." "Or what?" "Or I release everything we found in that office, including the truth about what really happened to your sister's insurance money." The color drained from his face. "You wouldn't." "The Daniel I married wouldn't have believed I could do any of this. But you don't know me anymore. Just like I never really knew you." He stared at me for a long moment, then something shifted in his eyes. "You've changed. You taught me how." Detective Moore entered with the confession papers. Daniel looked at them, then at me. "Your parents deserve to know the truth," I said softly. "About everything." His hand trembled as he took the pen. "I really did love you, you know, in my way." "I know, that's what makes it worse." As he signed, I thought about all the lives he'd touched. Not just the ones he'd destroyed, but the ones he'd tried to save, starting with his sister. How love and grief had twisted into something dark and destructive. "What happens now?" he asked as Moore collected the papers. I stood up, looking at the man I'd once built my life around. "Now you face what you've done. All of it." "And you?" "I stopped letting your lies define my story." Outside, Sarah was waiting with Monica. 3 women connected by one man's deception, now united by something stronger than betrayal. "Is it done?" Sarah asked. I nodded, feeling lighter than I had in months. "It's done." Behind us, Daniel was being led back to his cell, his shoulders bent under the weight of finally telling the truth. Sometimes, I realized, revenge isn't about destroying someone. It's about forcing them to face themselves in the mirror. The envelope from Daniel arrived on the same day as my final divorce papers. Inside was a single key and an address I recognized, the house where his sister had lived before she died. I found Sarah and Monica already waiting there, both holding similar envelopes. The house stood empty, its windows dark, lawn overgrown, a forgotten shrine to a tragedy that had spawned so many others. Should we? Sarah asked, her key glinting in the afternoon light. The door opened to reveal rooms frozen in time, family photos, dusty furniture, and in the study, dozens of boxes filled with documents. But these weren't financial records or evidence of fraud. They were medical bills, insurance claims, and letters, hundreds of them, from families Daniel had helped. Look at this, Monica held up a folder. Inside were records of anonymous donations to children's hospitals, paid medical bills for struggling families, college funds set up in his sister's name. My hands trembled as I opened another file. He used the stolen money to help people like his sister. To save them from what happened to her, Sarah added softly. A letter fell from between the pages, recent, written in Daniel's precise handwriting. By the time you read this, everything will be over. You've all exposed the truth about what I did, but not why. Maybe that matters, maybe it doesn't. But these families, they deserve the same chance my sister never got. I couldn't save her, but I could save them. The sound of a car door made us turn. Through the window, I saw Evelyn and Frank approaching, their faces drawn with the weight of fresh grief. They should see this, Monica said. I met them at the door. Evelyn's eyes were red-rimmed, but clearer than I'd ever seen them. Daniel told us everything, she said. About Claire, about what happened after she died. Frank held a stack of papers. We found these in our attic, Claire's original insurance denial letters, the ones that started all of this. Inside, we showed them what we'd discovered. Each document revealed another layer of Daniel's twisted attempt to right an old wrong, stealing from some to save others, destroying lives to preserve them. He wasn't evil, Evelyn whispered, touching a photo of Claire. Just broken. We all were, Monica replied, in different ways. My phone buzzed. Detective Moore. Sentencing tomorrow? Will you be there? I looked around at these women, each marked by Daniel's deception, each now part of something larger than revenge or justice. At his parents, finally facing the full complexity of their son's legacy. What do we do with all of this? Sarah asked. The answer came to me slowly, like dawn breaking through storm clouds. We finish what he started, the right way. Together, we formed a foundation, legitimate this time, to help families facing catastrophic medical debt. Named it after Claire. Used our combined skills, Sarah's real estate knowledge, Monica's legal expertise, my marketing background, to build something honest from the ashes of Daniel's deception. At his sentencing, I finally understood why revenge had never felt like enough. It couldn't fill the void left by betrayal, couldn't heal the wounds that drove him to wound others. Daniel looked different in court, smaller, but somehow more real than the man I'd married. When asked if he had anything to say, he turned to face us all. I'm sorry, he said simply, not for trying to help them, but for hurting you to do it. The judge gave him 15 years. As they led him away, he caught my eye one last time. In that moment, I saw not the man who had deceived 3 wives, but the brother who had watched his sister die and spent the rest of his life trying to prevent that pain for others. Outside the courthouse, Evelyn touched my arm. Thank you, she said, for helping us understand. I watched them leave, these people bound together by one man's desperate attempt to rewrite a tragedy. The Foundation's first meeting was tomorrow. We had work to do, lives to save, the right way this time. My phone buzzed again, a message from one of the families Daniel had helped. We heard about the Foundation. How can we help? Sometimes I realized the greatest revenge isn't destroying someone's life. It's taking their broken dreams and building something better from the pieces.